covered a lot of ground, and we've talked about what brought us together originally. And you're bringing your students from Kyron College to stay at our place at Ipswich. And you've talked a lot about your philosophy of education, but I think what I'm getting a bigger picture now.
Right, yeah.
Especially as you talk about the things that you're involved with now. But also I think what's really exciting and lovely for me is clearly that the sort of meeting of the minds that must have happened between us back in 1970 is clearly happening again.
Yeah.
So the question arises, what's that about too? What are those things that we share? And what I've been hearing that relates to your approach to education, you've said a number of times, and some of your students who came to the reunion that you interviewed have said too, that Kyron College sort of set them up for life, or it gave them a way of living, approaching life. And what I'm hearing from you, this is a long question, isn't it? I'm answering the question myself. What I'm hearing
it's
is
just warm up.
It's all of a piece. How the various things you've done in your life and that you're doing are in a sense all of a piece with that adventure that you had when you were only a young man in creating a learning environment.
I suppose the key thing was that when we started the school, we used to say, because it was unusual for its time, we used to say that we won't really know how successful the school is until many years later, when the students have grown up and probably had their own children, and looking back, how they valued that time, whether it did something special for them or nothing at all. When we had the reunion, we could actually have a forum which we held, and a lot of people said what Kyron meant to them. And yeah, the most common thing was that it gave them an opportunity to discover themselves, who they were, what they wanted to do, and how they could achieve the things that were important to them in life.
And a lot of us spend our lives trying to, we don't find out who we are till much later in life. So you really gave them something at that stage in their life, didn't you?
Well, part of the reason it was set up was because the system of education in New South Wales and Australia generally, and in many parts of the world, was very, very authoritarian. And it certainly was smothering a lot of people's self-esteem and journey to find themselves, because they were told what they should be, not what...
Yes.
To discover themselves and what they wanted to be and what contribution they wanted to make to community and living in the world and so on. So it was liberating for young people, and I think for a lot of us we didn't have that sense of liberation. It took a long time to feel that we were free to be who we wanted to be, and that our pathway through discovery came much later. The thing that came out of the forum was also that, with regard to their children, they were disappointed and frustrated that it was very hard to find a school like Kyron, similar sort of educational philosophy, that they could send their children to. And so it came out of, a lot of good suggestions came out of the forum. One was that I could start a school again, which I thought was not such a good idea. But But what I did feel, because there is a lot of advocacy now for very, very strong changes in the directions of education, and that message is coming through globally. And it is about returning to the most valued assets that we as human beings have, and that is to be imaginative, to be creative, to be able to be innovative and make change, take risks, to discover new things, new ways, to be able to be self-determining. And that means taking self-responsibility. So what I thought was, here is an opportunity to use the voices of all those students and their experience, and the friends of Kyra and the other people who were involved in the experience, and people from other alternate schools that have existed over the years, and look to make fundamental changes in education. That if we could get together and tell our stories, then we would be an indication to community that the changes that people are advocating are not fanciful and against the grain. They are actually bring about wonderful positive change, a wonderful development of young people to be able to contribute to society in a very positive way. Here's the example. People aren't talking about something unknown. The people have tried over centuries to make changes. So we can actually put there with the story that this works. Mm-hmm. So let's look at making these changes to make education relevant to the 21st century.
In the education system, in the mainstream education system, artists were held up as special beings, as these sort of genius people. And at that period in Australia's history, most of them existed elsewhere. It wasn't something that Australians could do particularly. So I certainly, in my own life, having studied a fair bit of English literature, had an idea that poets were these faraway people who were in the covers of a book and who were very exceptional, and somehow, the idea of genius was in there.
Yeah.
So your approach broke all that down, didn't it?
Yeah, well, that immediately brings to mind what we actually did together, and that was that we talked about the value of young people meeting with artists on a play level, not say look up and we're going to make you admire these people because they're very, very special. It's say, let's go meet some people who are artists doing very interesting things that relate to society in Australia. They're not from old traditions from elsewhere, but they're actually about the here and now then, at that time. And so you invited the students to come up to Ipswich and accommodated, I can't remember the numbers exactly, but it would have been about 30 to 40 students, I'd say, each time they come.
That many, okay.
Yeah. But they, Judith Wright came and socialised with students, and as part of that socialising, read some of her poetry to them. But it was like they were studying Judith's poetry for their HSC exam, but they could actually meet her and talk to her and see her as a person, not just say, what did you mean by that poem and what did you mean when you wrote there? It was actually meeting a real person and hearing things that they felt about life and hearing them actually present their art to you. And it wasn't just Judith, it was Kath Walker, and they both came on all three occasions that we came up to Ipswich. They were actually, the students met them, they were involved. But there were many others. Helen Hankey, I remember, came, Tom Tom Shapcott. Tom read his poetry and was at that stage your husband and co-host.
And father of all those little children who were underfoot all the time.
But yeah, it was like a living experience, and that was very much the essence of Kyron. And it wasn't just art, creativity in the arts. It was saying that all things are creative. If you're going to write the history of a society or a country or a time, whatever, you have to do that creatively. You have to find new ways of getting information, how you interpret that information, how you have ideas of what you consider were important in that time. You have to make a lot of value judgments, which is why history is constantly reinterpreted. It's not one person writes it and says, that's it, now we can go on to something else. There's always different ways of looking. You have to be creative. If you're going to do science, you have to be incredibly creative and innovative and think up wonderful new ideas. But you have to have a discipline to be able to test all those ideas and see if there is good information, data available to support the hypothesis that you creatively, brought up. So it was bringing all those things into part of the community, saying it's all done by human beings, we're all human beings. And to say that one group of people have talents far beyond what you will ever have is a very damning thing to say in education.
Yes.
And there was far too much of that. There were students who were told they couldn't study history because they weren't bright enough to do that. And this is Kyron, and they came to Kyron, and students, history is one example, were in the top 10 of the state. There was one occasion when Allen Ginsberg was in Sydney, and at the same time Andrei Voznesensky, the Russian poet, had been at the Adelaide Festival. And we were asked to look after Andrei Voznesensky while he was in Sydney, and he said he wanted to catch up with Allen Ginsberg. So we said, fine, Allen's giving a recital at the Sydney Conservatorium Hall. Let's go to that. We went there, and message was put down that Andrei was in the audience. Allen Ginsberg came out and said to Andrei and the handful of students from Kyron who wanted to come to the concert as well, the recital, we were all invited to go backstage and sit on the stage as Allen Ginsberg read from Howl, the poem that the movie of recent movies come out, Howl, about Allen Ginsberg. It was like, you don't have to say he's so famous and incredible that we were immensely, in awe of him, that we had just to sit and for the students to be able to say, hi, here's a human being, and afterwards we were invited to go back to the hotel and sit and chat and talk and so on. And this was like an everyday experience for students, and that's what it should be like. And there are many, many people in the community, if you ask them to come to your school and sit with a group of kids and talk, they'd love to.
Inviting the children to other events outside the school and treating them as adults, weren't you? I think this is a crucial issue in here about the stage of life that those young people were at and your ability to relate to adolescence, really. That they felt treated with respect.
Yeah. And that was a very big thing, because we always said, like, when we're employing other teachers to teach in the school and be part of the school, not just employing, but be part of the school, one of the fundamental things we said, that it doesn't operate like the old system of you have to show due respect to the teacher or you will be punished and so on. There was no punishment of any kind at the school. And we said to teachers that you need to earn their respect, as they need to earn yours. That it's a mutual thing, finding that respect. It isn't there by stated, it's there because you are a person who respects them and they in turn respect you. And that certainly worked. It was so easy. Yet when we the Department of Education, I think it was in about 1974, sent some student teachers to Curran to see, because they were interested in the system being so different. And the teachers who came, student teachers who came, were quite interested in the school and what it was doing. It was very, very different, but they said they couldn't teach in a school like that because they felt they'd have no control. They said they heard students calling me John and said, how on earth can you have any authority in this place when you call by your first name? And, where's the discipline? And I said, we don't discipline students, they discipline themselves. Because they're the ones that decided they want to do the HSC. They've taken on a responsibility. They need to face that responsibility, and they won't if you actually tell them what to do all the time. But you can say, if that's what you want to do, there are certain things you're going to have to achieve in terms of passing the exam and those sorts of things, what level you want to do that, what you want to do after. So it's their choice. It's not your choice, it's theirs. And if they make the choice, then they're motivated to whatever amount of work's required to do it. But within that, we also said that education is a thing of society, the whole community. It's not something that just takes part within the walls of an institution. Education is a part of life. That if you give that experience, those in connecting with life and life experiences as part of the education process, then they're richer to be able to face something like the disciplines required to gain academic status in a particular study, if that's what they want to do. But to do it by pushing society out there and saying, here's this bit of rigidity that you've got to learn, seems to be a waste of time. It's part of life. So you say, let's embrace life. And life, the responsibilities you need to be able to enjoy life and contribute well to living and so on, to society and culture. And then as part of that, you've decided you want to get this academic standard, that's via the HSC. Now to do that, you'll have to develop some disciplines of learning, techniques of learning, and in that process also some information and knowledge, and the exam will be a breeze. And it is. It's easy to remember and understand stuff that you're intrigued by. It's very difficult to remember stuff that you can't stand and you're bored to death by, but you've got to commit to memory somehow so you can regurgitate enough.
And forget again the next day.
Yeah, as soon as it's over.
You know what I'm hearing? All this conversation, and not only about the school, but about the other things you've been doing in life. Seems to me what we're talking about is the difference between alienation and community.
Yeah.
And alienation is sort of like a disease of our times, isn't it? It's very widespread.
I think so, and in a way, again, today young people have been pushed away because they're doing things that are very different to what other generations did, like what the technology that's available, for example, which they've embraced with the greatest of ease and made great use of, and in a sense left teachers even behind because the teachers didn't have that training. Yeah,
very quickly.
Yeah. And it needs to find ways to reconnect all that, and the only way it'll be done is to make so that education is meaningful to young people. For example, teachers are telling me that as students get to the later years in primary school, they're totally bored. They want to do other things. They're being made to sit there. They don't care if they don't get full marks as long as they get enough to pass and don't get into trouble.
Yes,
they've got past it.
So in a sense they're alienated. I found out when I was teaching high school at Ipswich High School, there was a sort of passive resistance. So the passive resistance to being there and having to do what you were told and everything was to, in a sense, not be there, not to engage. And I can remember when I went on to have the teenage theatre group there, thinking, when you're on the stage, especially when you're on the stage alone, you have to stand up and be there. You have to be fully there and communicate.
Yeah.
There's no way out of that. And
Yeah.
I thought that was a salutary learning experience for them. We're talking about communication and meaning a lot, aren't we? My PhD was called Communication and Meaning.
Right, okay.
And what it was about was that people studying at university level, off campus, that's a difficult thing to do. So lots of people drop out.
Yeah.
So the question is, why do they persist? Is it about the people who persist?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer I had was because that experience is meaningful to them in their own terms.
Yeah.
And actually in education, by then, in the education discourse, the word meaning was just not there.
Yeah.
You couldn't talk about meaning. There was no way of talking about meaning. It was all about measurement.
Yeah.
I started this by saying, isn't it interesting our minds have met? So in our different ways, we have been on about the same thing.
And actually, when you were talking about the value of drama, when we were chatting yesterday, the thing that came out, I think is so important, is that you don't actually get a group of people to put on a play that somebody actually wrote. You get them to do the whole lot. You get them to write the play, direct the play, put it together with direction and discussion and collaboration,
yes.
But to actually have that experience of how the whole thing happens. Not just the thing of reading a play by someone to study academically, to have that experience. And doing that, they take possession of it, they own it.
That's right.
Say, this is ours, not mine, ours, it's ours. We've done this. And they've learned an awful lot about how a play is written, directed, presented, received. Many people have been saying this over the centuries, that these are the values that are most important in education. It's the nurturing, it's the creating opportunities for growth and development, and for maturing to being a responsible person who's happy, who's full of self-esteem and joy of doing what they're able to do and share it and collaborate. And people say, oh, that's rubbish, you're just talking idealism, but it isn't. I've seen it too many times where there's this simple joy that comes out of people being self-expressive. When it was suggested via the forum at the reunion that we get the students from Chiron to tell their story, their experience at Chiron, and to tell the story as to why they were looking for something different than what was available in schools for their children, that given that there is this advocacy now for change, Chiron is an example that the kind of change they're advocating actually works. It is positive. People actually said that it was sad that Chiron was an innovative school 40 years ago and is innovative today. It should be old hat. It should have moved on. Chiron, what was Chiron, would have grown into, grown and changed again to suit the times, instead of it seems to have reverted back.
In many ways, I think.
Yeah. And I must say, look, this is not really teachers. There are an awful lot of teachers who want all these changes. It's to get those changes in a system that's become so rock solid. It's very, very difficult and very frustrating. There are a few exceptional teachers who've somehow found the energy and the avenues to bring really special programs into education. But it's very, very difficult. It should be happening. It should be easy to do. And for change to happen, we have to engage the community, connecting with all levels of community, for people of all generations and ages. It's not just...
That's a big ask.
Yes, I know, but I think we need that to make it work.
Have to find the common threads.
Yeah, and find ways that older people can tell their stories and it will engage younger people, and vice versa. I think that can be done if the approach is right. And the approach is actually by being guided by people, by young people, and getting young people involved, being guided by older people, getting older people involved, and all the people in between. It's basically opening the doors to welcome people who are interested in, and then they actually have output. We can empower ourselves to make significant changes, and we can do it without being aggressive. We can do it by simply explaining and creating greater understanding amongst people, and showing by example that these changes will be very positive and very valuable to the future. It would be great to have your children talk about, tell their story about education. I mean, there's that, little part of their life where Karen was there visiting, but they've had interesting experiences having children and facing not only their own education but also into the next generation. And that's what I mean by going into community, getting as many stories as possible. It's not just talking to students who went to Karen or other schools, but also to people who are passionate and interested in education and have points of view that they want to express and say. So, that's one line that we could go down, which I've been thinking about, is saying to the students, as bit by bit, getting the interviews from them, but to say, could we get your kids together? For say a group of you, there might be half a dozen. We could get together, say in Sydney, it doesn't have to be one-on-one all the time. It could, we could have group meetings, we could have forum things, we could have one-on-one, but to bit by bit collect stories and give voice to people, because I think at the moment people just think it's too big. To try and change the system of education, it's just impossible.
Yes.
Well, it's not. We're living in a democracy. We're the ones who elect the government. We're the ones who say what policies we want. We're the ones who say what laws we want and what we don't want. That's our actual right. The system of education belongs to us. Therefore, we can actually change it.
In a sense, we have created it.
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
And the internet's one way of doing that. So that's one thing. But it needs a lot more. And if the more people who do little bits, the bigger the thing will be. So it doesn't have to be one or two people going out there and fighting the cause. And it's actually gathering people in and say, let's do something.
So that's interesting too, that you've changed that model in your head. You changed that model. It's not one or two people going out there. It's not a David and Goliath picture. That's really...
So it's a bit more like Karen. It's a bit like saying, you're the ones that are responsible.
Yeah.
We're just here to show you some options.
Okay.
But you've got to make the choice. It's pointless if it's you and I marching, rising the flag, and we'll be exhausted and we'll
absolutely
be dead before we know it, just from frustration. It's really doing little things. That's why I say a little community here. You've got some people who might like to talk about their education as part of their storytelling. It's not telling everybody to talk about education. It's saying, is there something special you'd like to tell in your story about education? And then if they do, you might be interested to have a look at such and such. It's on the internet, or something that someone's doing, or whatever. So people are engaged by being acting.
So it's not only about a model for education, it's a model for social change.
Well, it is. Well, that's what I think education is. Really.
Yeah.
It's about living. That was a very current thing, that this whole institutional idea of education is wrong. It should be part of society. You need the spirit of support of others to be able to do that, and that you were the person who played that role
back then, you know?
And it was why I think, without thinking it in detail, it's why I wanted to seek it again, and it has become quite frustrating over the last 12 months to try and get all this together. And the way to do it is to collaborate with other people and together find the strength to be able to do it. So it's actually is that reliving of something that was special and never lost, and it was still there to be picked up all these years
Yeah,
after.
isn't it exciting?